everybody, to Friday Night Conversations. Glad you are here. We have a great show lined up for you. Tonight, I am going to be interviewing a very, well, let's just say, very interested person into the true crime genre. His name is Thomas Grant. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. It's nice to be here tonight.
Glad to have you here. Um, I'm going to go ahead and let you give a brief introduction of yourself so people will know what you're all about, and then we will get started into some serious true crime.
Oh, sounds good. Hey, this is Thomas Grant. I have a podcast called Logan County Justice 2. This is our second season. We had one just named Logan County Justice. And I pretty much, focus on cases in West Central Ohio. Logan County is kind of where we are based out of, but we're looking at unsolved crimes down here locally, or crimes that have been solved, but we think that they may not be quite right, and we shed light on some missing people that we think need to have some attention shined on them. So that's pretty much all I do.
Okay, very good. Well, tonight we're going to be talking about some interesting cases. First of all, we're going to be talking about the Michael Latimer case. And Michael Latimer was last seen in Ridgeway, Ohio on November 23rd, 1999. He was supposed to pick up the title for a vehicle he had purchased. He's never been heard from again. A family acquaintance reported him missing later that day. Latimer was a witness in an ongoing criminal case at the time of his disappearance. The case has since been dismissed. It's unclear whether the criminal investigation is related to his disappearance, which remains unsolved. Now, did I get all that right?
That sounds good, Steve.
Okay, well, go ahead and give us everything that you have to bring us up to speed on that case.
All right. Well, actually, we just we did a few episodes on Michael just here recently, and like you said, he disappeared November 23rd of '99, and from what we understand, in the summer of '99, he was arrested. Well, he wasn't officially arrested, but he was caught in some capacity with stolen antiques. And from what we understand, that was when he agreed to work with the Logan County Sheriff's Office to report on his boss at the time, Joe Rosebrook. And roughly right around when he went missing was when he got out of jail. He was in jail. I never found out why. I don't know if it was related to the antique theft or what, but he just got released, and I know later the Logan County Sheriff's Office said that they had planned to put him in protective custody, but that did not happen before he went missing. Now, November 23rd, the stories that we have been told by law enforcement off the record and other people involved with the case was that he was picked up that afternoon by a car with three men in the car. Two of the men have been identified that as far as we know, and they took him. And that's the last he was seen. So, fast forward 24 years now, almost 25 years this November. And the stories related to Michael and what happened to him, the rumors, it's horribly sad. Because it's obvious Michael's not going to come home. We've talked to his family, his sister in particular, and a few friends of his, and they just want Michael brought home.
Yeah.
They know he's deceased, and they just want to have a burial site somewhere where they can go and visit Mike, and and just have that ability to show him that respect. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I mean, there's so many different theories, so many different avenues that I have, rabbit holes that I have went down. And if you want to ask me questions about that, you're more than welcome to. But as far as officially, I know in December, there was a search up there near Russellvania, at an old junkyard. And that's the first movement in this case by the sheriff's department in a very long time that I can tell. I did reach out to the sheriff's office for comment, and they did not have any, which, I understand, Steve, it's an ongoing case. But um, as far as we know, nothing was found. But it is heartwarming to me that the sheriff's office appears to still be actively pursuing finding Michael and figuring out what happened with him.
Okay. So he was 18 at the time of his disappearance, correct?
That is correct. He just turned 44, I believe, January 1st, 43. His birthday would have been January 1st.
Okay. And he was supposed to get a title for the car that he had purchased. Now, who did he buy the car from?
Joe Rosebrook.
Joe Rosebrook.
Yes, sir.
Was he ever suspect in this? I think he was.
Yeah, he was. I would have to say he was the prime suspect.
Yeah.
Because Michael was. I mean, it's been verified by the sheriff's department. Michael was reporting on Rosebrook for the stolen antiques. And Steve, if you know anything about Joe Rosebrook's history, if you're going to testify against Joe Rosebrook or report against him to law enforcement, that's not going to be good. He's appears to be a very aggressive guy as far as silencing people.
Yeah. And was he the one that Michael was supposed to testify against?
Yes, that was the one who, he was reporting against, was Joe Rosebrook.
Now, is this still considered an open case?
Yes. Absolutely. I know I got a letter last year from Joe Rosebrook, and it was intercepted by the sheriff's department. And I tried to get that because it was addressed to Thomas Grant, but they told me it's a piece of evidence in an open case and they cannot release it, which, I understand. So no, it's still 100% active, and they don't really give out any information at all because it's still an open case.
Yeah, so it's not considered a cold case.
Well, I mean, Steve, it's 25 years old. I don't know what cold is, but that sounds pretty damn cold to me.
Sounds pretty cold, doesn't
it? Yeah, but I mean, they're still working it, so that's good.
Yeah. Well, I think they call it a cold case if we haven't gotten any new evidence in a long, long time or something like that.
Yeah, I'd say it was probably pretty cold for a while. I mean, down
No.
in our area. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Tell us more about that dig they had at the junkyard recently.
Well, I mean, some of this, obviously, they're not going to release a lot of the information related to what made them go there. I've heard from some people that it was related to the letter that I received from Joe Rosebrook, that he had put information in that letter about that junkyard as being a stopping off point in some capacity for what happened to Michael that night, or roughly, I don't know if it was that night, but whenever he was murdered. So that's what I've been told from sources that I have, but I honestly can't tell you one way or the other how they got that location. Now, what's interesting about that location is I don't have my notes in front of me. I apologize. But the owner of that junkyard, her son used to be an auxiliary deputy sheriff for the Logan County Sheriff's Department. Up until I think the late 80s, mid to late 80s is when he left and went to Las Vegas, or went to Henderson, Nevada. But I thought that was kind of ironic that a former deputy sheriff, his mother owned that junkyard.
Yeah.
And so that's all we know. We know they dug a big hole. I was told about 10 feet deep or so. I could have that wrong, but pretty big. The width of it was pretty large. And I heard another story that there were some cadaver dogs that had hit on that area. I have not got that confirmed by anybody, but that is a story we heard. So that they dug a pretty decent hole, but unfortunately they said they didn't find anything. Now it's possible, Steve, they did find something, and they're keeping it under wraps, which is perfectly fine. I understand that.
Have they ever considered digging there before now? I mean, this is just the first time?
Now, I talked to a deputy or a retired sheriff's official off the record, and he said that there's been rumors of this junkyard being involved since the beginning.
Okay. Now, Michael had been involved in crime, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, he got wrapped up with Joe Rosebrook, and one of Joe Rosebrook's associates, Carl Stevenson, worked at a garage in Russellvania with Michael. And I think Carl Stevenson was kind of the contact point for Michael to start doing some stuff illegally for Rosebrook.
Now, was this garage a chop shop?
I spoke to some people there. They don't know if this garage in Russellvania was the chop shop, but they're pretty certain they got the stolen parts from Rosebrook directly.
Yeah. Now, Rosebrook was known to have chop shops, right?
Actually, yeah, and actually, there was a quote I read a few months ago from a retired FBI agent who worked investigating Rosebrook back in the 90s, and this retired FBI agent said that Joe Rosebrook ran one of the most complex car theft rings in the entire country. So this guy was really good at what he did.
Yeah. So, do you think Rosebrook had something to do with his disappearance?
Well, let's take a step back real quick and just look at some stuff that happened with Rosebrook before Michael. One case in particular that's verified in 1983, a guy named Ray Payne had gotten arrested with Joe Rosebrook. I think they had stolen property, and Mr. Payne had agreed to testify against Joe in the trial. And if I remember correctly, it was 2 days prior to his date of testifying. He went out to his car or truck. I can't remember if it was a car or truck, and started it up, and a stick of dynamite went off and blew up his car. He lost, I think, his left foot and part of an arm, was injured. It took 3 months before he was able to get back into court and testify in that case. So, unfortunately, when Mr. Oh shoot, I just forget his name. Mr. Payne got to court that day. He mentioned in an open court with the jury present that Joe Rosebrook tried to kill him, which forced the judge to declare a mistrial. And after that, Joe Rosebrook, he did plead guilty instead of going to trial, and he served 1 year in prison for that charge. And since then, we have to be clear, since then, Mr. Payne has came out and said that Rosebrook did not bomb his car. But I mean, Steve, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at those facts, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
And one more thing, I forgot this. There was a story in the Columbus Dispatch, and they quoted Rosebrook as saying, at the time when the Ray Payne bombing occurred, he said something along the lines of, "If anybody is going to testify against me, they're going to be a dead SOB."
Okay, that's pretty blatant.
Yeah, I mean, he was right out there with it. I'll give him that.
Yeah. Yeah, no wonder most people in that area are scared to talk about him. I know if you bring up that name to a lot of people there, they kind of freeze.
Oh my good, the fear is everywhere, and
Yeah.
even now. I mean, Joe's been gone for years. That people are still scared of him.
Yeah. Miranda Hundley said, "Hello, Thomas and Steve." Hello, Miranda.
Hey, we're going to be at.
If anybody in chat has any questions, feel free to type it in, and we'll be glad to address them. So you're going to continue to cover this case, aren't you, Thomas?
Yeah, I mean, we've made a commitment to his family and friends that we're going to keep putting pressure. You know, I don't want to say pressure, but we want to keep the story out there. I think it's very important for people to know about it, because, Steve, let's be real. There's people out there that know what happened.
Sure. Yeah.
And we just got to reach the right person to say the right thing at the right time, and it doesn't have to be me. I would rather them call the sheriff's department and talk to the law enforcement directly, not me, and help locate Michael and get him brought home to his family.
Yeah.
So we're not going away.
Okay, good deal. Well, let's move on to the Moody Massacre.
Oh goodness, you're pulling up the greatest hits down here.
Yeah. That was Scott Moody refrained for his family's annihilation.
Well, a lot of people believe that.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Yes.
According to investigators, on Sunday, May 29th, 2005, the morning he was to graduate high school, Scott Moody walked across his family's failing dairy farm to his grandparents' farmhouse and shot them both dead with a .22 caliber rifle. Then he returned home, reloaded, and went from bedroom to bedroom, shooting relatives and friends while they slept before shooting himself twice in the head. The first shot from above and behind his left ear lodged in his sinus. The second through the right side of his mouth was fatal. Oh, that sounds really, really weird to me, man.
Yeah, I think the first thing that jumped out to me was the multiple shot suicide.
Yeah.
Especially with the rifle. I know it's a .22, but it's still that's a tough gun to use to commit suicide in the first place.
And to survive.
And to survive one shot and to have the wherewithal to do it again, that sounds pretty hard to believe, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was what 2005. I mean, I remember when this happened. It was just an unbelievable tragedy to lose so many people in such a short time. Right there, it's graduation day, Steve. I mean, it's a big, in small communities, graduation day is a huge deal, and I mean, it just completely shocked the area and the region. But I'll tell you something, Steve, that I think is interesting. This the day the murder happened, May 29, 2005. I think the sheriff's department they were there. I don't want to quote, but whatever time they got there, 11 hours later, Sheriff Mike Henry said during a press conference that the case was solved.
Okay.
It's a little, I mean, in my mind, that's a little quick.
Yeah, it is.
But, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Miranda asked a question. She said she stepped away for a minute, but wants to know if Joe Rosebrook passed away or did he move away or what happened to him?
Joe Rosebrook, no, he's actually in prison for life.
Okay.
For another murder for hire plot.
Okay. All righty, that answers Miranda's question. So back to the Moody Massacre. Now, how many people were killed? There was 8, correct?
Yeah, I mean, his grandparents, Gary and Cheryl Schaefer, his mom, Sherry Kay, and 2 of his friends, Paige and Megan, and then himself, and then Stacy, his sister, was shot twice, I believe, once in the neck.
Yeah.
But she miraculously did survive.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It is, yeah.
So they were all related except 2, correct?
Correct. Paige, I think Paige was Scott's girlfriend. I could be wrong. She was Paige was his girlfriend, I believe. And they had just started dating, unfortunately. And I believe Megan was a family friend. And there was another gentleman who was there for the party, and he left that morning, I want to say, an hour before the murder started. I don't have his name offhand, but that's a lucky kid that he left when he did.
Yeah. Now, it seems like the local authorities really wanted to put this on Scott so they can close the case. Is that correct?
I mean, I'll play devil's advocate. The fact that the sheriff closed the case in 11 hours, I understand to a certain degree that you want to put the public's fear at ease so they don't think there's a mass murderer roaming around the county. I get that.
Yeah.
But I think there needs to be after the fact, after he made that statement, it seems like that's what we're going to go with. This is what happened. And you know what they talk about when the investigators get blinders put on, or they just look for evidence that supports their theory. Are they really solving the crime, or are they just doing paperwork?
Yeah. Yeah. So didn't uh, didn't Scott have some kind of mental issues that he had been treated for prior to this?
I don't know if he was treated. I do know, and I spoke to this lady directly myself a couple years ago. She worked for a woman's abuse shelter in Logan County, and after interviewing her, it does seem that Sherry Kay, Scott's mother, did visit with this lady about 6 weeks before the murders, concerned with Scott's anger, and his behavior and threats of violence. So, I mean, that definitely is a red flag, Steve, that something may not have been going on good in that household leading up to the murders.
Yeah. And even if he was having mental issues, that certainly don't make him a killer.
No, I mean, I have a teenage daughter, and teenagers can have moments where they're not quite doing the right thing or acting the right way. So, I don't want to jump to that conclusion that he's a killer just because he may have been a little mad with his mom.
Yeah. Well,
Because
we're all,
I mean, Steve, look at that. I mean, let's be. This is my personal opinion. If you're angry at, say, your mother, and you get angry enough to kill your mother, okay, I can see that happening. It happens, unfortunately, more than we like to admit. But the level of anger that would take to walk to your grandparents' house, kill them while they're cooking breakfast, and then walk back to your own house and kill your girlfriend. Well, your girlfriend was upstairs, so he killed the friend who was sleeping downstairs on the couch. Went up and they believe killed the mother second. Then goes in and shoots his sister. Then goes in at some point and shoots his girlfriend. And then, according to Stacy's story, he realized she wasn't deceased, and he went back and shot her again. And then goes into his bedroom and shoots himself twice in the head. I mean, that's unbelievable rage and focus
yeah.
that for an 18-year-old, I that's really hard for me to wrap my head around.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Um, Now, Melanie Braga has a question. If you see if they're in the book, you talked about affairs with a person from sheriff office. I could not tell what was true and what was fictional. Any clarity?
Yes, that was, I think, what really blew this case out of the water. And the lead detective at the time at the sheriff's office was John Stout. And it became known a few months into the investigation because the stepmother of Stacy's stepmom, overheard a telephone conversation between John and Stacy that she felt was inappropriate. And that opened up an investigation, and it was determined that there was definitely inappropriate activities going on between John Stout and Stacy Moody, sexual in nature. Now, Stacy was 15.
To say the least.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievably bad. Now, I will say this, and I can't, release names or anything, but I can say with 100% clarity that the affair did not start until after the murders. There's been some stories that maybe
Yeah.
that was the reason for the murders, and I promise you that's not the case. That didn't
Yeah.
happen until afterwards.
As a matter of fact, that's how he approached Stacy, if I remember correctly, saying he wanted to help her through it or something like that.
Yes, yeah. But when he was questioned by the grand jury, I'm talking about John Stout. He really tried to blame the dad, Steve Moody, and the stepmom for pushing for the friendship between Stacy and John because they wanted Stacy to admit that Scott was the shooter.
Yeah.
The problem
Didn't
is
she at one time go along with that briefly?
she did. I've read the transcripts. I want to say the first 3 or 4 different interviews, she stuck to the story that it was a gray-haired man in a blue T-shirt that shot her.
Yeah, let's talk about him. Tell me more about that guy.
Well, that's the only thing I really know. There's some stuff in the book about a gray-haired man being introduced to the crime scene shortly before the murders happened, but um, we were able to determine that that information in the book was not accurate. There was no gray-haired man seen that morning, but
Oh, okay.
in the book, Saving Stacy, that's really the premise is this gray-haired man was the assassin. But again, Steve, we found nothing to confirm that. And I have heard, and take this for what it's worth, but I've heard from people who were first responders that morning, and they said there was a volunteer EMT who was on scene who had gray hair and a blue shirt. And they thought maybe, because Stacy, let's be clear, like it wasn't like she was coherent and able to say the ABCs. This girl was near death. And the first responders that I talked to off the record think that maybe that was where the gray-haired blue shirt guy came into her mind, but that's just their theory. I don't know one way or the other.
Yeah. So Stacy was shot 2 times in the face. Is that correct?
I think the neck, yeah. I know one was in the neck. That was the most serious injury. I can't remember where the second one was, but she was she fell back to sleep and she woke up and stumbled downstairs and fell asleep in a recliner. I mean, this girl was in that scene for a long time because she was just so completely out of it. She had no idea what was happening.
Well, it's miraculous that she lived.
It's an absolute miracle. You're right. It's God bless her for living. That's amazing. She has kids now, and she's moved away, and she has her own life, and I'm very proud of her and happy for her.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm glad. Yeah, she deserves to be happy.
Absolutely. I mean, that's just a horrible situation. But yeah, just to clarify for what you said earlier, eventually, Stacy did say her brother was the shooter.
Yeah.
And then after that, she went back to saying that it wasn't. So there's the biggest problem here is, Steve, you have the lead detective sexually abusing this girl. So, I mean, talk about she's in a vulnerable position and he's using that power over her for sexual reasons. I don't know, how can you even try to pretend to put yourself in her position?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. So his conduct, let's just say this. If Steve or Scott Moody, let's be crazy and say Scott Moody did it. If he did it, this detective doing what he did to Stacy had completely ruined everything as far as their credibility. So the only people to blame for all of this is John Stout and his inability to keep his pants zipped.
So what happened to John Stout? Did he ever face any kind of charges over this?
Well, they brought in a outside prosecutor, an outside judge, and eventually, as they always do, they plea bargained down, and he pled guilty to, I want to say it's like endangering a minor, and she was in a car driving at a high speed. Some, quite honestly, some BS charges. At the time, they took his Ohio peace officer certification. That was part of the deal. And John Stout's legal team, they did not agree to that, so they were upset. And I do believe, I've heard varying stories. I don't know if he has that back. I've heard he's in law enforcement, and I've heard that he is a firefighter. But he was fired from the sheriff's department, and he was convicted of a misdemeanor.
Yeah. So what's he doing now?
I don't know. I've tried to find him. I think I did a few times, but he keeps blocking me for some reason. I don't know why.
Okay. So who would have had a motive to kill all them people? Who is suspected, if anyone?
That's the thing. I mean, the motive is really tough to come by. My thinking is, and I've talked to a lot of people involved. And I'll say one thing that's very consistent is even people from the school, Riverside school systems, who knew Scott very well, said that there's no way in hell this kid killed people. I mean, number one, his friend said he did not like guns. It was not something he liked to do. He didn't like shooting. And everyone who knew him said that was just not in his nature. Now, that doesn't always prove to be true, but with all of that being said, the only person on paper that would have a motive would be him, right? But what if there's other people? I know there's a couple boyfriends of Sherry Kay. One boyfriend she was with at the time, who was married, and who was a drug dealer. I think that's definitely a person that needs to be looked at. His wife was his alibi, which, Steve, that's not very good if you ask me. And there's another ex-boyfriend of Sherry Kay's who still worked on the property, and I've had people associated with him say that they have a lot of suspicions about him. So I think if it's not this gray-haired assassin that was in the book, which I don't believe, I do think it has to be one of these guys.
Yeah. Now, I recall somebody saying the fixer killed them. Do you believe that? Is that a plausible thing to consider?
No, and I'll tell you why I think that. There's no sexual relationship between John Stout and Stacy Moody prior to the murders. There's no proof that they were, Sherry Kay was involved in anything at a magnitude that would call for this kind of violence. They were just typical middle-class people. So I think the idea of the fixer, it works really good in a fictional book. Yeah. But when you look at the reality of these people, why would the sheriff's department go out and kill all these people plus innocent victims? I mean, there's people who aren't associated with the family, like family and friends. Like, why would they do that? It doesn't make sense to me at all. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, and that's fine. But from everything I've seen, I don't think the motive was there for anyone other than Scott or someone associated with Sherry Kay, a boyfriend or ex-boyfriend.
Now, do you think we'll ever know the truth?
No, I don't think we will. I think everything's been so tainted down here with John Stout's conduct, and with the sheriff's department closing the case within 10 hours, 12 hours. I don't think the truth will ever come out. The only people that's going to know, unfortunately, are deceased. And Stacy says her brother didn't do it. I mean, to this day, her brother didn't do it. So, I mean, who am I to challenge her? She lived through it.
Has she ever done any interviews with anyone before about it?
She did a documentary called Porcelain Dolls that was associated with the author of the book. And that, to me, is the only on-camera conversation that I have been able to find. I think I could say this. I may have reached out to her off the record, but she, as far as I know, she has no desire to be interviewed by anyone ever again concerning this topic.
Yeah, I guess she just wants to try her best to forget it. And of course, she never will, but, I
right.
can understand her trying to.
Yeah, no, I don't blame her. Just the stories, and I think, and I'm not speaking too ill of people, but I know for a fact that the conduct that the author did towards her during the book and the video, I don't think that came off well. I think he really made her feel like she can't trust people in that capacity.
Yeah. All righty. Well, let's move on to the Arthur Smith murder, shall we?
Yes, sir.
All right. Which resulted in the wrongful conviction of George Skates, as we know.
It sure appears that way.
Yeah. Now, the Logan County Sheriff's Department and the Bell Fountain Police Department didn't do a very good job of investigating this case. And later on, the Lyles, Sheila Lyle and Bruce Lyle. Sheila was a daughter of Arthur Smith. So the Lyles were the family of the victim. In reviewing all the documents in this case, the information provided by the victim's family to the investigators in 2002 should not be overlooked or ignored. They knew Arthur better than anyone and have maintained that George Skates is innocent. The independent investigation done by Michael Smith and the Lyles well surpasses the investigation done by Logan County Law Enforcement and the District Attorney's Office in this case. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would.
Okay. So Michael Smith, he was a son of Arthur. So him and his brother-in-law, Bruce Lyle, decided to investigate elements of the crime not being addressed by the police. I really don't blame them at all for doing that. And this was in 2002, so they had a lot of time to think about this. It wasn't just something they done on the spur of the moment.
Yeah, they had, 33 years to wait for the truth. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
wow.
So Mary Ann Smith, the wife of Arthur at that time, she had been in the country long enough to testify at the trial, and then went on a supposedly prearranged trip to Monte Carlo. And this trip was supposed to last less than a week, but somehow Mary Ann wound up in Germany with her family and stayed there for the duration of the trial after she testified. The Lyles mentioned this to investigators and thought this was odd for a bereaved wife to stay away from proceedings which may reveal the murderer of her husband. Yeah.
Yeah, you think? What the hell's in Germany that's more important than getting justice for your husband's death?
Yeah, maybe they didn't have a, what do you call it, an extradition thing or agreement, what do you call it?
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that was definitely very, very odd. If she really cared about the man, I don't think she could have done that, in my opinion.
No, I completely agree. I completely agree. If my significant other got murdered and there's a trial to convict the guy who did it, I am going to be there every second of that trial.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kathy Clevenger, the daughter of Mary Ann, stepdaughter of Arthur. Now, what did she do at that time?
What did she do at that time?
Yeah, during the trial. She didn't go to the trial even though she was subpoenaed, correct?
Correct. Yeah, as far as I understand, yes. No, she did not.
Okay. And it was learned after the trial by the Lyles that Sheila Lyles' grandmother, Art's mother, had a close friend that sat on the jury.
That doesn't sound very good.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if anybody ever talked with her about that.
Unfortunately, I never did, but yeah, that seems to be a little bit of a conflict.
Yeah. Now, Lyles learned by an insider at Rinks that Mary Ann made an inquiry to Rinks' main office about the value of Art's life insurance policy with her company the very day that his body was found.
Jeez,
Wow.
She was ready.
That's kind of a big deal right there.
You would think so. That's a few red flags.
Yeah. Did they mention that during the trial?
I would assume not. Mr. McGilvery, who was the prosecuting attorney, I don't think I don't think honesty was in his forte anyway.
Yeah. Didn't he fall on kind of bad luck after that trial?
He did. And I remember I talked to a person who worked back then with him indirectly and said that, when Art was murdered in 79, and Mr. McGilvery had the hopes of becoming governor of Ohio. And this case was open for so long, it was a black mark. And then all of a sudden, during an election season, he suddenly George Skates is murdered, or he's the murderer, and he's convicted. But it didn't work out well for the prosecutor. He did not. His career went to shit after that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it should have.
Yeah, I agree.
Should have. Yeah. Um,
I don't.
Go ahead.
I said I just don't understand. Just looking at the little bit of information we have right now, Steve. You're a true crime guy, so am I. That right there is the motive of so many spouse on spouse murders.
Yeah.
It's all about money.
Yeah.
I don't know why or what she had that relieved her of any true suspicion.
Yeah. And see, the law stated that Smith had saved a substantial amount of money to put a down payment on a small farm, and that he had just received a yearly bonus check from Rinks. After discovering that Smith was deceased, this money was never found or accounted for in Smith's checking account. Interesting. And all this just kind of happened. It just kind of happened, right?
Yeah, just all these thousands and thousands of dollars. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And the $24,000 that was stolen from Rinks the night of the murder was also never recovered.
I mean, just I'm looking up right now, Steve, and I'll fill you in how much that would be in today.
Yeah, how much?
I'm gonna give you 1 second to today.
Oh, 10 times that.
$104,691.
Wow.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd buy a pretty nice farm right there, wouldn't it?
It sure would.
Yeah. It said the Lyles observed that Mary Ann made several large purchases after Arthur's death. Well, yeah, I'd say she did.
Well, they say everyone deals with grief differently, but that's a really unique way of dealing with grief.
Yeah. She probably bought a farm in Germany.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah. Now, was she ever even investigated by the sheriff's department or Bell County Police?
I mean, the Bellefontaine Police. I from everything I've seen and read, it doesn't appear that she was ever looked at all. Which, what is it, Steve? Isn't it like 70% of murders is and maybe it's 60%, but either way, more than half of murders is done by your spouse or significant other.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it doesn't take
because of the life insurance policy.
Yeah, it doesn't take Columbo to figure that out.
Yeah, exactly.
So she had something going, man. I don't know what it was.
Yeah. Now, where is she now? Isn't she in South Carolina?
I believe so. I actually tried to get a hold of her a few years ago, but she never responded.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised about
that. And her daughter, but she didn't. I think she actually blocked me, so I think that avenue is closed for me.
Yeah. So the information was received from Bruce Lyle's brother, Mike. Mike Lyle knew a tenant in the apartment building located behind Rinks. This is the same apartment building where the red Volkswagen was supposedly driven by James Rogers on the night of the murder. And that Volkswagen, and why was it ever, the Jimmy Rogers story about that Volkswagen doesn't make any sense.
No sense whatsoever.
I mean, that was just totally crazy. I mean, first of all, he didn't know anything about the car.
No, he didn't. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a manual transmission car, correct?
Well, normally they are, but in this case, it wasn't. In this case, it was automatic.
And so James Rogers had that backwards.
Yeah, he kept saying he had a hard time driving the car because of the clutch. Well, it didn't have a clutch.
So how do you miss it? How do you mess that up? If you really
Well,
drove that car, you'd think if you just killed a dude, you're going to
right,
remember a lot about the car you drove.
yeah. And there was no blood in the car.
Hmm.
There was
No,
nothing, no tire tracks from that car's crime scene that I recall.
no.
Um,
Any
there's
fingerprints,
no
Steve?
physical evidence that supports anything he said.
No, I don't know if you have this on your list, but just the movement of that car that night makes no sense. I mean, according to James Rogers, him and George Skates, right? They were in the Volkswagen with Mr. Smith. They drove him to out to where his body was found, and then Jimmy decides to leave George there with Mr. Smith and drive the car back to Rinks.
Yeah, why? Yeah,
Why the hell would you do that?
yeah,
You're going to want to get as far away as possible from the crime scene, where the abduction took place, if what James said was right.
yeah,
Why would you go back? That makes no sense at all. And this guy, he's such a genius. He's able to wipe away all DNA, or well, they didn't have DNA back then, but he's able to wipe away all evidence in that car.
yeah.
You got 3 full-grown men, and that car is not a big car.
Yeah, Volkswagen. I used to have a Volkswagen, and two's a crowd in that car.
Yeah, 3 of them. I mean, it's a clown car, but he wiped it all down, huh? He's a pretty amazing criminal.
Now, Miranda has a question. She says, I saw George yesterday and we were laughing about the car's story. Jimmy said, how did the jury bug that story?
I think you may need to ask the jury member who was related to the family of Mary Ann. I forget that one jury member. Sheila Law's grandma, Art's mother had a close friend that sat on the jury. I don't know. I mean, Steve, and you're a little older than me just by a couple of days. Back in the 70s and the 80s, and I think even up into the early 90s, would you agree with me when I say that society looked at prosecutors and law enforcement professionals like they were almost impeachable, like unimpeachable? They were amazing people.
They were held up in high esteem. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think maybe part of it could have been the jury just buying what was being sold because they trusted a prosecutor over a defense attorney.
Especially in a small town like Belle Fountain, when everybody knew everybody and half of them were kin to one another.
Exactly. I mean, talk about a venue needing to be changed. That one definitely should have happened.
Yeah. Was that ever requested?
I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken. And I could be wrong, but I think it was requested and it was denied.
Yeah, Miranda says, Jimmy said, okay, George, you stay here and I'll come back for you. How would George just stay there? A good question,
Yeah.
Miranda. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes no sense. Oh, and of course, while Jimmy is gone, George just suddenly decides to murder Mr. Smith.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, man. Come on, Jimmy.
He probably bought him a hamburger too, right?
Yeah. He went and he got the Georgia milkshake, and
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Nothing whatsoever. But yet, that's what they went with at the trial, and that's what they sold the jury on.
And again, it's shocking, and it's shocking that there's not been one appeal that's been able to get this guy a new jury or new trial.
Yeah. In a future show, we're going to talk about some of those jury members. We do know who they were. Some of them talked about it later, and some didn't. I don't know if you're aware of that or not.
No, excuse me, no, and I would be very interested to hear what they had to say.
Yeah, we'll talk about that at a later time if you want.
Absolutely, yeah.
See, while visiting this tenant, both Mike Lyle and his friend Sam Sigdenhauer were told by two children who lived in the building that they had wandered into a vacant apartment during the time period of Arthur's disappearance and observed a man who was tied up.
Hmm.
That might be a little bit of a red flag, mightn't
It very well could be. Yeah. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, Smith stated that the children were soon discovered and ran out of the apartment. He stated that the families of the children tried to report the incident to the police and got no response. According to the children, the man disappeared the next day after the discovery. Hmm.
Well, that's very, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Smith stated that during their investigation of the apartment building, they canvassed these tenants, some of whom told him of a disturbance coming from the same apartment where the children had seen the man tied up. One of the tenants said he observed the police in the apartment cleaning blood off of the wall.
Jesus.
Smith speculated that Arthur may have been held here for a time before he was killed. Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah, I mean that's small town cover up 101 right there.
Yeah. And these gentlemen that weren't even police officers got all this information, and really they done 10 times better than the police and the sheriff's department did.
That's that's a very good assessment.
And if I remember correctly, they did hire a private investigator that helped them. Is that correct?
That's how I understand it.
Yeah. There are two reasons to believe Arthur Smith was never transported in the red Volkswagen as testified by James Rogers, and to the fact that he was brought to where his body was found in the bean field many days after he went missing.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Smith and Lyle also discovered that the car had the spare keys in the ignition. The original set was on Arthur Smith's key ring, which was found on his body. Smith expressed that it was unlikely Arthur had used the spare set, which were usually in Kathy's possession.
Huh. And Kathy is that the stepdaughter?
Yeah, that's Marianne's daughter. Yeah.
Huh. So she had the only other set of keys.
Yeah, apparently so. So
And those
she had
keys were
keys.
and those keys were in the ignition.
Yeah.
And Arthur's keys were in his pocket.
Yeah.
So wait, so let me just. So George and Jimmy somehow went to Arthur's house, snuck in there, stole the keys from the stepdaughter, and then went back and kidnapped Arthur. Okay, yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense, Steve.
Yeah.
What the hell?
If you want to get away with murder, go to Logan County, Ohio. I heard that somewhere.
That's yeah, I've heard that a few times. Yeah, and they say Mr. Harvey said that, so you never know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Speaking of Mr. Harvey, what was the sheriff's name in Logan County at that time? Was his last name Harvey?
It was Harvey. I can't remember his first name offhand, but yes, it was a Harvey, I believe, or was it the chief of police?
Yeah, I think it was the chief of police.
It was the chief of police. You're right. Yeah. But like just right there, I mean, the key. How the hell do you explain how these guys got that key?
Yeah.
You can't. I mean, if they did this crime, there's no way they got that key. That's just absolutely crazy that McGilvery could try to manipulate the facts to explain that away. I don't even know how he did explain that away.
So clearly then, in reality, Kathy had the Volkswagen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure seems that way. And wasn't there one fingerprint found in the car, Steve?
I don't know. I don't recall anything about that.
I think there was a print, one single print found in the car, and I want to say it was on the steering wheel. And it was not George's, and it was not, it was not anybody else but Kathy.
Yeah, Miranda says Kathy was the only fingerprints in the car. Okay.
So if you're the detectives on the case, how the hell do you explain that? The girl who has the spare keys leaves physical evidence in the car, and the only physical evidence in the car is her fingerprints, but she's innocent? She's not involved?
Yeah, you know, there's three men, two of them, well, all of them were alive at one time, allegedly, in the car. So somebody had to have some fingerprints if they'd been in that car.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
you think, I mean, somebody, there would, if it went down the way Roger said, there would have been fingerprints and blood. I'm not saying Arthur was pouring blood out, but he had to get bumped on the head pretty damn good to get knocked, in the state where he could be taken. If their story's right,
Yeah.
there's going to be blood droplets everywhere in that car.
And that brings me to a question. Has anyone ever suggested to the DA in Bell Fountain to go back and see if they can get some DNA out of the Volkswagen or the crime scene or Arthur's grave or anything?
With the, I've never heard anything about that. I know with the Volkswagen, there'd be a chain of custody issue with the Volkswagen because that's no longer in police custody, so they couldn't.
Who has that?
But you would think there would be some way,
Yeah.
to do something there. I mean, just the fact that, every piece of evidence we've seen here, Steve, it says it's the mom and the stepdaughter. I mean, that's what it's saying right now.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. See, the other factor is that Michael Smith and many town volunteers conducted a physical search of the town and surrounding rural areas, including the bean field where Arthur was found. Smith stated that he and his friends walked this bean field many times looking for a clue or a body, but found nothing. Smith stated that Arthur's body could not have been there up to a day before it was found.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You don't miss a body when you're looking for a body.
Especially if 10 people just walking through the field,
Yeah, and when he was found by, I believe, by a property owner who was outside doing gardening work, and he looked over and saw the body. Like, it wasn't even hidden.
Yeah.
It was visible from this guy's yard. So I don't believe that his body was there until the morning it was found.
And of course, there are people that believe that the body was in the freezer at Marianne's house, correct, on her carport.
That is one theory of why the decomp was different than it should have been.
And her car started being parked in that carport to hide the freezer about that time, even though they had never parked it in the carport before, correct?
That's how I understand it. Yes. Yeah. What's that tell you?
Yeah. There's about 70 million red flags here.
This is not how it's supposed to work, Steve. Mr. Arthur deserves for justice to be enacted here. He was murdered and viciously, just tossed out into a field, and the people who did it are free. And the guy who didn't do it is on death row.
Yeah.
It's an absolute travesty. of the justice system. This is what happens when you have prosecutors, especially back in the 70s and 80s and even into the 90s, that have so much power and so much control, they can do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah.
And I think that is what happened here. You had a McGilvery just doing whatever he felt was right, even if he knew it was wrong.
What was right for him, not what was morally right.
Right. It wasn't the right person wasn't convicted. It was the convenient person was convicted.
Yeah. And that's what it came down to. You know, and they wanted to get rid of George Gates, and they did it. They did it.
They did. You know, it's ridiculous. I mean, George, I remember seeing pictures of him from back in that day during the trial, and he was an intimidating looking guy.
Yeah, how tall was he? He about 6'5" or something like that.
I can't remember offhand, but he was, maybe Miranda will know. But I mean, he was a scary looking dude. But and I think they played the.
Yeah.
I think that was part of the reason they picked him.
Yeah.
He looked the part.
Yeah. Well, I think the Bell Fountain Examiner really made him out to be kind of like Charles Manson in the paper right after they discovered, right after his arrest. Isn't that correct?
Oh, absolutely. There was so many stories printed back then that made Mr. Skates look like the worst thing since Satan. He was tried and convicted in the public arena before that trial ever started.
Yeah, no doubt. He didn't have a chance.
No, not down here, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And it's mind-boggling that some people believe this is what happened.
Are there people in Logan County now that really believe that justice was served that day?
I think at the time, people who were not engaged probably believed what they read. But I do believe I've talked to people who off the record who worked at the court, who said they knew it was not a good conviction. They were shocked when he got convicted.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people knew what was happening, but they didn't speak up.
I wouldn't be surprised if some of the jurors were not intimidated, to say the least.
Intimidated or paid, either way. Something happened.
Yeah. Or maybe they feared for their lives or the lives of their family members.
Wouldn't
so
you
much
be?
Could have been going on there.
I think I would be a little scared, knowing that, hey, if you can kill Arthur Smith and frame somebody else, how hard is it going to be to knock me off?
Yeah. And people are still terrified to talk about it there today. So imagine what that's like back then.
No, back then it had to be at a fever pitch of fear. Yeah, absolutely. And these are the people we elect to represent us. These are the people we elect to do the right thing. And this is what they do. Yeah.
Now the whole system, with the Constitution and all that our country was built on, it was all built on the premise that most people are upright and honest and honorable.
Yes.
The
you're
system
right.
worked great as long as that was the case, but that's no longer. You can't take that for granted anymore.
No, and no, you can't. And unfortunately, in the last 20 years, I think as a society, we've seen so many people get, let out of prison because they were innocent. And I think the society is seeing it now, which is a good thing. But the problem is you got people who have already been executed that were probably innocent.
Yeah.
Or you got people who spent 50 years in prison for not doing anything.
Yeah.
Now, how do you make that right as a society?
I read somewhere today, I believe, that said that Ohio has 130 people on death row now. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot.
It is, especially. I mean, if I was governor, it would be a very, very difficult decision to kill anyone in custody, because what if? What
Yeah.
if they're innocent?
So how long has it been since Ohio executed anyone?
You know what? I think I remember reading something about last year, but um, I'm going to look it up real quick. It doesn't look like there was one last year either. I could be wrong. No, we haven't had one in 5 years.
5 years. Okay.
July 18th of 2018 was the last execution in Ohio.
So Miranda says that George was 6'1", but he looks my size in our picture because he's getting older and frail. Okay.
Yeah, and what? How old is George now?
77, I do believe.
70, and I know from what I understand, he's going through a lot of medical issues.
Yeah,
this poor guy. This poor guy.
I think he has a cataract for one thing.
I can't imagine the hell that he has been in for the last 40 years.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see here now. Smith stated that one of the many things that aroused suspicion in him and other people in the town was the preferential treatment received by James Rogers from the Logan County officials. Yeah. Smith felt that if Skates was really guilty of the crime, then Rogers was just as guilty. Why did Rogers get to live in the Bell Fountain jail and get special privileges like being able to go to the movies with officer accompaniment or work out in the town gymnasium? Smith stated that he confronted the police with this and other questions about Rogers, but the police would not respond. Imagine that.
I wonder why not.
Yeah.
If you're going to have a guy sell a story that's obviously BS, you're going to want to give him every benefit you can to get him to stick to the story.
Yeah. I think, which reminds me, I think I'm going to try, and I'm pretty sure it won't work out, but just for the record, I want to ask someone on the sheriff's department in Logan County or the police office in Bell Fountain for an interview to try to give me their account, because there's so many accusations about corruption in the county, and see if they want to clear the air.
That would be great. I hope they do.
I doubt it, but
that's all we can do is ask. That's true, but yeah, I would. There's so much from back in this time.
Yeah.
That where there's smoke, there's fire, man.
Yeah. And there's a lot of smoke around there, huh?
There's a hell of a lot of smoke.
Yeah. Smith stated that his father said that he had suspicions about Logan County officials being involved in illegal activities, and said that if anything to happen to him, he had all of the information written down and it will come to light. And that book was never found.
Isn't that ironic?
Yeah. So that right there sounds like motive.
Sounds like sounds like a big
the sheriff's department, the prosecutor, somebody really had reason to get rid of him and get that book.
Yes, I don't know if this is in the list you're getting ready to talk about, but I know Arthur was looking at some missing medication from the pharmacy, and from what I understand, he was about to, let that out. He figured out what was going on.
Yeah.
So obviously, there was some shady business going on, and from what I understand about Arthur Smith, was this guy was straight laced. It's white and black, and if it's bad, I'm going to tell people.
Yeah.
I think he sounded like the kind of employee any company would love to have, because he was all about doing the right thing.
And if I remember correctly, at least going by what I have heard, Kathy was not really too happy with Arthur or her mother. Didn't she say that her mother was a money hungry bitch or something like that?
Yeah, it definitely seems like there was some trouble in paradise there between the stepdaughter and
Yeah,
and mommy. A lot of drama there with them ladies.
yeah.
That's how it seems.
And wasn't Kathy, didn't she run around with Jimmy Rogers?
That's what. Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, take that for what it's worth, but it sounds like there was a previous connection there of some sort.
Yeah.
Now, would that explain how he got the keys if he was involved?
Yeah.
I don't know. I still have a hard time believing that at all. I mean, I think the story of the kids finding a guy tied up in that building makes a hell of a lot more sense.
It does. It does. I mean, I don't believe anything that Jimmy Rogers said.
No, I don't. Yeah, I
Nothing.
don't. Mm. No, it makes a lot more sense that that's what happened.
Yeah.
You can if he has information you want to get from him. I mean, not to be morbid, but if you tie him up somewhere where no one knows where he's at, and you can torture a guy and get everything you need.
Yeah. It wouldn't take much.
It wouldn't, and I'm sure Arthur probably just wanted to go home, so he
Yeah.
probably
He
gonna
was
tell
a
him
little
what.
guy too, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he just wanted to go home and be with his family, even though it seems like the family may not have wanted him home.
Yeah. Exactly.
At least the stepdaughter and the mother.
Yeah. See, Arthur Smith told Michael that he had caught the son of a prominent bail fountain attorney named Gosley
Mm.
stealing drugs from Rink's pharmacy. Arthur wanted the police to press charges, and he would not take no for an answer.
Well, yep, there it is. Yeah, yep. And Gosley, that name is still very powerful down here to this day.
Is it?
Yeah, he's still an attorney, and yeah, they're still very prominent.
So is this particular Gosley still alive?
Well, let's see. The son of a prominent attorney. I would say, yeah, because if he was the son of the attorney back in '79, yeah, he would have been born in roughly 1960-ish.
Okay.
So yeah, he's
Probably
probably
an
still,
attorney now too, isn't he?
he's probably getting retirement age, but yeah, he's still probably active.
Yeah.
Huh.
And Arthur told Michael that police chief John Harvey, that was his name, John Harvey tried to intimidate him into keeping quiet about the matter. Arthur Smith disappeared a few days after this confrontation.
Huh.
Oh,
Is that another? That's another piece of evidence of a motive, wouldn't you say?
yeah. So the
Here's
Lyles did a good job with this investigation. They really did.
Yeah. I mean, they did a hell of a lot of good work here, work that needed to be done.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm reading ahead. It's just it's mind blowing. The level of corruption that had to be prevalent down here for all of this to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
And I spoke to a lady who worked at the sheriff's office when Jimmy Rogers was in jail. And she talked to me privately about how it was just, she couldn't believe the treatment he was getting, the benefits and all the stuff he got to do. And from what I remember, what her telling me that he pretty much had free roam. He could come and go as he pleased.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not jail.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys in jail right now saying, "Hey, how do I get that?"
Exactly. And they'll tell any kind of lies. They don't care to get out of jail. If you're in jail and you don't care what you got to do to get out, you just want out.
Absolutely, man. Freedom has you want your freedom. And poor George got caught up in it, man. It's to me, it's so obvious that George is just the wrong place at the wrong time. Not even that. He wasn't even
He wasn't
near
even
the place. Yeah.
Logan County, was he? He
He
was
was
in Marion, I think. at the
Yeah,
time.
I mean that's how what everything looks like. There was no proof that he was even down here then.
Yeah, and I think Miranda told me Marion's about 35 miles away or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's not right around the corner. It's a little bit of a drive.
Yeah.
Absolutely shocking.
And Michael Smith stated that when his father told him about the above referenced incident, he advised him to go to authorities above the district attorney or maybe police in a surrounding county. Arthur told Michael that he couldn't because the authorities were involved and he had been warned that because of his knowledge, he was in a dangerous position. Wow.
So because Arthur was aware of them stealing the drugs and dealing drugs.
And Arthur he kind of expected something apparently.
It sure sounds like it. Sounds like he knew that he was playing with fire.
Yeah. Maybe his mistake was just telling his family, the people he loved and trusted.
That and probably telling the chief of police, Harvey.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
But I mean, what are you supposed to do? I mean, you would hope that you could trust the chief of the police department to do the right damn thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And once the cat's out of the bag, you can't put it back in.
Yeah. And of course, how many movies have been based on small town corrupt cops and sheriffs?
There's a reason that sometimes art imitates life a lot.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, there is so much in this investigation. What I would like to do, if it's okay with you, in a few weeks, I'll have you back and we'll look at the rest of this investigation because we're about halfway through it.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'd absolutely be interested in doing that.
Yeah, so this is a good time to just go ahead and wrap that up for now. And then we will pick back up on it in a few weeks. Now, I've already got some great interviews lined up for the next 2 weeks. And then we'll probably have you on 3 weeks from now, if that works for you.
Absolutely. You just let me know and I will be ready for you.
Okay. Very good. Now, do you have any kind of announcement you want to tell people about what you got coming up?
Well, I mean, actually, it's going to play in perfectly to this. Here in the next couple of weeks, we're going to start telling the Arthur Smith case. We're going to start going over that. I want to take our time because, as you know, it's a very complex case. So it's going to work out perfectly with what you have going on right now. And I believe a little birdie told me that Miranda may be interviewed for the first episode concerning this George Skates conviction and Arthur Smith murder. So she's you interviewed her just last week and she knows her stuff. So we are going to take advantage of her knowledge too.
Yeah. We had a great interview.
So yeah, that's what we got going. We're all doing Arthur Smith right now. So that's great.
Okay, good deal. Good deal. Well, Thomas, thank you for coming on tonight. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you and picking your brain, and I look forward to doing it again.
Absolutely, Steve. I appreciate the time, and I will look forward to talking to you here in a few weeks.
Okay, very well. So I will let you go and tell you good night. And
all right.
I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight to Friday Night Conversations. Feel free to share this video and like and subscribe to my channel if you would. That would be appreciated. And everybody have a good night, a great weekend, and we'll catch you again next time. So good night, God bless, and take care.